Many sales teams are often not fully equipped to deal with negotiations. Early in my career, I felt incredibly anxious and uncomfortable whenever I was negotiating with customers. I conceded far too early on customer requests. I gave away more price or discount than I needed to. And I would often say yes to a lot of requests from customers without ever trying to push back or ask for anything in exchange. And it was only when I realized my own discomfort that I was able to change it. And I found that developing the skills of negotiation, developing my confidence to have more difficult conversations with customers and to be comfortable with silence, that really made an impact on my ability to negotiate and manage those negotiations effectively. I learned some key negotiating principles and then focused on preparation. But once I'd started to develop and build my negotiating skills and I learned the importance of preparation before negotiations, I went into customer conversations much better prepared. And in those situations where I was well prepared, the outcome for both me and the customer was better. I'm Justin Leigh. I'm the founder of Focus for Growth. We're a sales and leadership training company, and we specialize in working with organizations that sell in B2B markets. I've been in sales and leadership positions for over 30 years, and I'm the best-selling author of Inspire, Influence, Sell, and Coaching Leaders. Very often I would ask the customer for something during sales negotiations, and if they weren't negotiating, it meant that I was continually building and increasing value for myself and for the organization I was working for. And I noticed that customers actually started to respect and appreciate our relationship even more. And the key change was that I was in control of that negotiating conversation. And I've learned that when you negotiate in the right way, the value perception actually increases in the customer's eyes. And we're going to talk about the right way to do that. You'll learn some simple principles that can really transform the way you negotiate with your customers. So let's talk about negotiating fundamentals. In the world of sales, it's common to encounter customers who engage in negotiations not just to secure a better deal, but to feel as if they've won. And to navigate such scenarios effectively, preparation is absolutely key. We cannot afford to enter a negotiation unprepared, risking uncomfortable conversations with our customers. Today, we're going to explore 6 fundamental principles of negotiations that empower us to handle these situations with greater confidence and clarity. But there are a few prerequisites. You have to have an established relationship with your client. You have to follow your sales process. You have to ensure that the customer wants and needs what you're offering, and that you've agreed in principle that you want to do business together. If any of these points are missing, you may find that your position in that negotiation is compromised. So let's assume that you have those in place, and let's look at our principles. So principle number 1 is about embracing silence. Silence is one of the most important skills we can develop, not only in negotiations, but in sales more generally. For many of us, we are incredibly uncomfortable with silence, and it takes a concerted effort to overcome it. But the use of silence is particularly important in negotiations. When entering into a negotiation, we should take a moment. We should slow things down for us and the customer and allow yourself to get comfortable and manage your emotions. By doing this, you create a sense of discomfort for the customer, granting you an advantage in the time you need to handle the negotiation more effectively. It gives you thinking time, it demonstrates that you're taking the discussion seriously, but silence is key as part of your strategy for managing negotiations. Principle 2 is about showing your reaction to requests. Often when customers make requests of us during negotiations, we instinctively accept it without hesitation, without responding. However, when a customer asks for something that pushes the boundaries of reason, it's crucial that we show a reaction. This reaction is important because it shifts the pressure from us to the customer. And in that shift, it enables you to regain a greater sense of control as you work through the rest of the negotiation. Building on the rapport and trust you've established as part of your sales process, you can then leverage the customer needs to your advantage during that negotiation. Principle 3 is about focusing on outcomes. And it might sound obvious, but we should never lose sight of the desired outcomes, both for the customer and for us in our business. Our goal is not to make the sale, but to make and maintain a mutually beneficial partnership with that customer. Keep the focus on these outcomes, avoiding defensiveness and any undesirable situation. If we become defensive, the customer is likely to become defensive too. By focusing on the outcome, we maintain that for us and the customer. Principle 4 is about the preparation that we take in listing the negotiation points. Effective preparation extends beyond the customer's specific request. It involves us anticipating various points of negotiation. Rather than fixating on a single request, which is often price-based, think broadly about what could be negotiated. This more comprehensive approach to negotiations equips you to navigate them much more effectively. Principle 5 is about recognizing we should trade, not give away value in negotiations. It's essential that we remember that we should always counter a customer's request with a trade or a counter offer, not merely give in to customer requests as many people find themselves doing. Really thinking about what we can gain from the customer in return for anything we're prepared to concede is really important. This will also increase the value perception for the customer. They'll believe they're gaining something of greater value when they have to exchange for it. Principle 6 is about striving for a win-win. Ultimately, the ideal negotiation results in a win-win scenario for you and the customer. Consider what makes the proposal a win for the customer and what benefits you and your organization. By aligning your interests and finding common ground, we maximize the chances of reaching a successful agreement. It's easy to forget in the heat of a negotiation to keep the win-win in mind, but it's important that you do because it creates a loyal, positive relationship with your client in future. So let's talk about the negotiating framework. To further enhance our negotiating position, we employ a structured negotiating framework, and you'll see from the image, this framework categorizes requests made by customers and the offers or trades we're willing to make. And as you can see, we focus on delivering high value to the customer whilst incurring minimal costs on our end, and vice versa. This structured approach really starts to reveal valuable insights and opportunities for both you and for your customer. Now let's talk about preparing for negotiations. So in preparation for negotiations, we should consider the requests and trades we can bring to the negotiating table with the customer. Think about what you're willing to trade and anticipate the requests that might come up from your customer. When you make a request, also be ready with a counter proposal, because very often negotiations are fluid, and to be prepared for that could be really useful. We're now going to talk about mastering negotiation skills at a deeper level and look into principles that can truly elevate your negotiation skills. These principles can be invaluable when it comes to client negotiations. Let's explore 6 mastery principles for handling negotiations. So principle 1 is the professional flinch. So imagine a scenario where a customer presents a request that makes you uncomfortable. Instead of instantly agreeing or not responding, we employ what we call the professional flinch. This technique is often taught to procurement teams in large organizations and involves an intentional physical or verbal reaction to the request. It could be a subtle recoil, it could be a facial expression, or something you do that is just literally makes an audible sound. So you might just literally flinch like so. And you might even have experienced this yourself if you've had a builder in to quote for some work or a tradesman of some description. Very often you'll get an exaggerated version of the professional flinch where maybe the builder puts the pencil behind his ear and says, this is going to be expensive. And it just starts to condition you and make you think differently about the price. So think about what that looks like for you, because this tactic is really effective at shifting pressure back to the customer. The second principle is about using a phrase that's called if you, then I. And this second principle introduces a really powerful negotiating phrase. The phrase if you, then I enables you to conditionally link anything you're prepared to concede or offers or specific actions to commitments from your customer. And by clearly defining what we talked about earlier, the trade-offs and the requests, and using this if you, then I, then you gain greater control over that negotiating process. This approach also fosters a sense of shared responsibility, promoting better balance and equity in your negotiations and conversations with customers. But it's really important to remember to have mapped out the trades and requests in advance for optimal results. So principle 3 is about price anchoring. And price anchoring is a psychological strategy that tethers the customer's perception of price to your terms rather than theirs. And it really is about confidently stating your price and then continually referencing your price throughout the negotiation. And you use your initial price as an anchor point for the customer. Even if you're open to reducing it, you might say, the price is £10,000. How close could you get to £10,000? And by consistently anchoring to that reference point, you keep the customer and you focused on the value you provide and the true price that you really want to be perceived around the service that you're offering. Principle 4 is about pricing increments. Humans tend to gravitate towards round numbers, especially when we're in negotiations. However, you can leverage this tendency to your advantage. Rather than offering significant discounts, you can break any concessions into smaller, incremental steps. This approach maintains your price position and prevents any hasty, substantial discounts. Experiment with this principle in your negotiations and see what difference it makes to your organization's profitability and, of course, your sales results, because the less you discount, the greater your sales opportunity and value. So principle 5 is about deferring to a higher power. In situations where you feel under pressure and other negotiation techniques perhaps haven't worked the way you were hoping they would, you can consider deferring to a higher authority within your organization. And you might express the need to consult with a manager or another decision maker to get approval. Often creating a pause in the negotiations can allow both parties to reflect. What I recommend if you do use this principle is to summarize the progress with the customer and then provide that anchor point for them to consider. Often this approach can lead to a more favorable outcome during the time when both you and the customer have some time to reflect. Principle 6 is about clear deadline communication. This final principle really emphasizes the importance of clarity regarding deadlines, because before we finalize any agreements, ensure that both you and the customer are on the same page regarding timelines. What happens is this step prevents any misunderstandings or missing any deadlines that are important for the customer, and it preserves the integrity of the negotiation process. Let me share with you a negotiating power question to really help enhance your position in negotiations. So the question is, how am I supposed to do that? And what happens with that question is it shifts the pressure back onto the customer, compelling them to justify their request. And if you combine it with a professional flinch for maximum impact, it can really help. So you might say, how am I supposed to do that? And the combination of those two elements really does help you to balance the power and start to feel much more in control of those negotiation discussions. I'd love for you to reflect on these negotiation principles and consider how they apply for you with specific customer situations. Identify actionable steps for implementation in your negotiations, and I encourage you to share your insights and experiences with your colleagues, with your manager, so that you can collectively start to refine your negotiation skills. These principles form the foundation for negotiation mastery, empowering you to navigate those more challenging negotiations and situations with customers with much greater confidence and success for you and them. When you have a greater sense of confidence in yourself, your customer will sense that confidence and feel more comfortable for you to lead negotiations. I wish you every success implementing these techniques, and I'm confident that you'll find this as transformational in your business as I have in mine. Good luck.